The dancing plague of 1518, when dance became deadly. The year was 1518 and the city was Strasbourg, a bustling, busy place that had all the hallmarks of a medieval European city. People hustled through the marketplace, merchants shouted their wares, and children ran through the cobbled streets. But that summer, something truly bizarre and inexplicable happened, something that remains one of the most chilling mysteries in history, the dancing plague. Imagine an epidemic where people don't break out in fevers or chills. Instead, they break out in dance. This was no joyful dance, though. It was as if these people were cursed to move their bodies against their will until their limbs gave out, until they could move no more. For centuries, historians, scientists, and sociologists have tried to figure out why this happened, what could have driven people to literally dance themselves to death. So, what exactly caused the dancing plague? Why did hundreds of people feel an irresistible urge to dance? An urge so powerful that they couldn't stop even when it meant risking their own lives? And what was the aftermath of such a strange epidemic? Let's dive deep into the world of 16th century Strasbourg to explore the strange and eerie case of the dancing plague of 1518. The first signs, Frau Troffea's dance. The story of the dancing plague starts with a woman named Frau Troffea. One July day, she suddenly started dancing in the middle of the street without any apparent reason. There was no music, no celebration, just her, moving her feet rhythmically, swaying and turning as if in some kind of trance. Passers-by were confused at first, watching with a mix of curiosity and concern. But when minutes turned into hours and Frau Troffea continued to dance without stopping, their amusement turned to alarm. She seemed unable to control her body, her face grim, devoid of joy or excitement. This was not a cheerful dance. It was something darker, something disturbing. And the most terrifying part, she didn't stop. She danced through the night, with onlookers watching as she twirled and stumbled, even as exhaustion set in. Still, she danced. Her family tried to help, but nothing could be done to stop her movements. The next morning, Frau Troffea was still dancing, her feet bleeding, her face pale. Yet she kept going, and she continued this for several days, reportedly dancing for nearly a week straight, before finally collapsing from sheer exhaustion. The epidemic spreads, a city in panic. After Frau Troffea was taken away, perhaps to recover or maybe to be given some much-needed rest, a strange thing happened. Others began to join her. By the end of July, more people were dancing in the streets, moving in a trance-like state. They would writhe and twist, spin and leap, all without any music or apparent joy. What began with a single dancer turned into dozens, and soon, hundreds were swept into this strange, compulsive movement. The phenomenon was baffling to everyone in Strasbourg. It wasn't a festival, nor was it a celebration. These people seemed to be dancing against their will, visibly exhausted and suffering, yet powerless to stop. Witnesses described their faces as pained, even anguished, as their bodies moved uncontrollably. Day after day, more people joined, compelled to dance, filling the streets, creating an eerie scene that could only be described as nightmarish. Doctors, clergymen, and city officials were called in, desperate to understand what was happening, but they had no answers. The townspeople became fearful, wondering if this was a curse or a punishment from God. Religious fervor was common in medieval Europe, and such unusual events were often interpreted as divine signs or manifestations of evil. Many believed that these dancers had been possessed by demons or were victims of supernatural forces, theories and explanations of the time. The people of Strasbourg had no modern science to explain what was happening, so they turned to the only explanations they knew: religion and superstition. Some believed the dancers had been cursed by Saint Vitus, the patron saint of dancers and entertainers, who was thought to punish sinners by making them dance uncontrollably. This led to the term Saint Vitus's dance, a term used for several different afflictions where people were said to lose control of their bodies. Churches held mass prayers, and people were instructed to pray for divine intervention. Some even built altars and conducted religious processions in hopes that it would appease the angry saint and stop the plague of dancing. Others believed it was caused by a form of madness, perhaps brought on by the alignment of the stars or the influence of the moon, which were common explanations for strange behavior. But these were only guesses, and nothing seemed to stop the epidemic. Others believed it was caused by a form of madness, perhaps brought on by the alignment of the stars or the influence of the moon, which were common explanations for strange behavior. But these were only guesses, and nothing seemed to stop the epidemic. Medical practitioners of the time thought it might be a physical ailment, perhaps a form of hot blood that needed to be purged. In medieval medicine, they believed in balancing the body's humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, and that an imbalance could cause illness. The doctors, desperate to find a cure, thought that maybe by encouraging the dancers to keep moving, they might eventually dance the sickness out of their systems. Musicians were brought in, and stages were set up for the afflicted to dance upon, in hopes that controlled dancing might relieve them. Ironically, this only fueled the plague, as more people joined in, feeling the uncontrollable urge to move. A closer look: ergot poisoning theory. One of the most widely debated explanations by modern historians and scientists is the theory of ergot poisoning. Ergot is a fungus that grows on damp rye, a grain that was a staple of the European diet in medieval times. When consumed, ergot can produce symptoms similar to LSD, including hallucinations, spasms, and convulsions. Some suggest that perhaps the people of Strasbourg had consumed ergot-contaminated bread, leading to their bizarre behavior. While this theory is compelling, it's not without its flaws. Ergot poisoning usually causes hallucinations and physical convulsions, but it doesn't typically cause coordinated rhythmic dancing. Moreover, it affects individuals differently, so it's unlikely that hundreds of people would respond to it in such a uniform way. The ergot theory remains popular, but it doesn't completely explain the strange phenomenon that gripped Strasbourg that summer: mass hysteria, a psychological perspective. Another prominent theory suggests that the dancing plague was a case of mass hysteria, or collective psychological illness. Mass hysteria occurs when groups of people start exhibiting the same symptoms, often as a response to stress or fear. This can be contagious, with people catching the behavior from others around them. Medieval Europe was a time of constant stress and fear. Plagues, famines, and wars were rampant, and people often lived in difficult conditions with high mortality rates and a strong belief in supernatural forces. Strasbourg itself was going through hard times that year. The summer of 1518 was brutally hot, crops were failing, and poverty was widespread. People were on edge, and the appearance of Frau Troffea dancing uncontrollably may have triggered a psychological response in others. They saw her suffering, and somehow, it spread like a contagious idea. People may have subconsciously joined in, driven by their own stress and fear, until the entire town was swept into the dance. The theory of mass hysteria has gained traction among modern historians, as it provides a psychological explanation that fits the social conditions of the time. But even this doesn't explain everything. How could so many people have danced for so long, to the point of collapsing from exhaustion? Mass hysteria might explain why people felt compelled to dance, but it doesn't fully account for the physical toll it took on their bodies. The aftermath and legacy. The dancing plague of 1518 eventually came to an end, though historians aren't exactly sure why. By September, the dancing began to subside, as people either collapsed from exhaustion or were taken away. But the event left a lasting mark on Strasbourg, and it remains one of the strangest cases of unexplained mass behavior in history. Hundreds had danced, dozens had died from heart attacks, strokes, and sheer exhaustion, and the city was left shaken and haunted by the memory. In the years following, tales of the dancing plague became cautionary stories, illustrating the mysterious power of the mind over the body, the dangers of uncontrolled emotion, and the potentially fatal effects of mass hysteria. It has continued to fascinate researchers, psychologists, and historians alike, serving as a dark reminder of how fragile the human psyche can be, and how fear and stress can sometimes manifest in unimaginable ways. The dancing plague of 1518 remains an enigma, a mysterious chapter in history that defies explanation even in our modern age. Was it ergot poisoning, mass hysteria, a religious curse, or something else entirely? Something we may never fully understand. Despite the theories and studies, the true cause of this bizarre dancing epidemic remains lost to time. What is clear, however, is that the story of Strasbourg's dancing plague holds an enduring power, captivating the human imagination, drawing us back to that hot summer over 500 years ago when an entire city danced its way into history, and some, tragically, danced to their deaths.